Alright, Dark Souls 3 is more than just a change in number, but I honestly didn't realize this until a little Easter egg was brought up. And in Smoldering Lake you can find the corpse of a spider. This is none other than Quelaag's sister, the Fair Lady. This little piece of trivia made me realize how much more of a sequel Dark Souls 3 really is. To Dark Souls 1, sorry Dark Souls 2, we're leaving you out. But this brought up the question, what else has been brought from Dark Souls 1 to Dark Souls 3? And well, the reason I started off with Quelaag's sister, who I'll now be calling the Fair Lady, is because there's more to her story, and this is where the genius of Miyazaki really shines. Just by looking at this single picture, it tells the fate not just of the Fair Lady, but her sister Quelana. Now, Quelana in no sense is a mysterious character. We can meet her in the swamp of Blighttown, in which she offers an assortment of spells. And upon looting the corpse next to the Fair Lady, you acquire the Quelana Pyromancy Tome. The title alone tells you who owned this item, and well, the corpse finishes the story. Pieces like this are spread all throughout Dark Souls 3 and are easily missable. I mean, besides Anor Londo. But even there, you have that heart-wrenching discovery of finding the giant blacksmith, which in my opinion is the game's saddest Easter egg. But before I jump too far ahead, let's bring things in a bit and just focus on the NPCs. And well, 20 seconds into the game, an NPC from Dark Souls 1 has already been brought back, and he's here to deliver your precious Estus. Now, I didn't clarify if he was alive, but yes, that corpse where you find the Ashen Estus is none other than Oscar of Astora, who in Dark Souls 1 gave you your first Estus flask. Now, I have no clue how he ended up in the Cemetery of Ash, but I see it more as a nod to his character, and somehow even after his death, he still manages to help you. There's also characters such as Havel, who we find next to a dead wyvern, which isn't surprising judging by his hatred for them. Although this might not actually be the original Havel, but someone else wearing his armor. Now, when entering the abandoned tomb of Gwendolyn, you'll come across any other corpse, and while the look of it doesn't tell the story, the armor you find on it does. And if you look back, it's the exact same set that the Darkmoon Nidus wore, showing you how she eventually perished in Gwendolyn's chamber. But you don't just need the armor set of an NPC to learn their fate, and well, in Irithyll you find the Easterner's ashes, and if the title alone doesn't tell you enough, the item description will. And it reads, Ash of an Armor Merchant from an Eastern land. And well, there's only one character synonymous with the East that sells armor, and that's Shiva of the East. This means that sometime in between Dark Souls 1 and 3, he didn't just die, but was reduced to ashes. And if you're still looking for more evidence, giving the ashes to the Handmaiden unlocks his armor for sale. While wandering the Grand Archives, you can find some odd statues, and if you look close enough, several of them are of Frampt, that weird snake character. Except, these statues depict him in a more godly state, with one even showing what his body might look like. Now, while exploring the Farron Keep, you might come across an odd-looking mushroom, and while its shape and size matches perfectly to Elizabeth, who was an NPC in Dark Souls 1. And if you wonder how she got to the Farron Keep, she's actually always been there. This is because Ulasil, where you find her, is actually the Darkroot Garden, which is actually the Farron Keep. In short, Ulasil is the Darkroot Garden around 200 years in the past, and now throughout time has turned into the Farron Keep, which is littered with references of Ulasil, from architecture to the crown that Dusk wears, and even a scroll that literally mentions the place. And well, this brings up connected areas and how almost every location previously existed in Dark Souls 1. And the way I mean this are examples such as Anor Londo, but of course less obvious. And a more popular one is Smoldering Lake. Many have speculated that Lost Izalith eventually turned into the Smoldering Lake, and well, that's half the story. As pointed out by Rive of Discard, Izalith and Ash Lake sit on the same height horizontally, so it could be that these two collided over time, and this would explain the iconic trees making a reappearance. Now, if Izalith became the Smoldering Lake, what happened to its other parts such as the Demon Ruins? And well, they also came along for the ride. And to the right of the Smoldering Lake is the Demon Ruins. Miyazaki doesn't even try to change the name. But this isn't just speculation, and you can find the remnants of not just enemies, but prior bosses, with them being scattered, thrown, and piled all throughout. On the ground you can find the Capra Demon, in the corner there's the Taurus Demon, in the other corner there's the Demon Fire Sage, there's also that statue enemy who's now actually a statue, and the Centipede Demon. Now, when exploring the literal maze of the Demon Ruins, you'll find yourself in a room full of eggs, except there's one tiny detail, and that's that the eggs have hatched. What was in them and where they have gone, I have no clue, but their source isn't too far. And well, just a couple floors up is the crushed corpse of the Fair Lady who managed to lay her eggs in this fiery wasteland. The original Anor Londo is surprisingly fleshed out, And when I first came across that place, part of me did wonder if I'd be able to explore the surrounding areas, and without knowing it, I eventually would. Just a couple years later and on an entirely different game. But the area I'm speaking of is Irithyll, which resides under and around Anor Londo. Of course, it doesn't look exactly the same, but keep in mind that Dark Souls 3 is a convoluted time mess of past areas and kingdoms that have either fallen or grown into place. I mean, look how out of place Lothric seems. It looks as if it almost emerged from the ground. Now, an area I could do a whole video on would be the painted world of Ariandel and Aria Miss. These areas are brilliant in the way that the painted worlds share the same characteristics but are altered just enough so they feel distinct from each other. But a perfect example of this is the intro cutscenes, which both hold parallels to each other. Except one is being sucked into the painting and the other's being sucked into, Gale. But the portal's color and size are relatively the same, and the ripple effect is no different than the other. Also, your character has that fun little leg kick at the end. But when I say distinct features, I mean some of Ariamis's most notable architecture is back. The bridge you spawn on is likely the same one before Sister Frida, and if you're just like me and always wanted to go to the other side, you're now able to, just in the Painted World DLC. There's also one of my favorite architectural Easter eggs, if I can even call it that, but it's Priscilla's tower, which just sits there barren and lifeless. This emptiness is frustrating because we know the fates of so many characters, but for Priscilla, there's nothing. In both basements, there's the same wheel device that activates the same statue, and with its now damaged state, it's safe to assume that these are the original pieces. In a fascinating video by Alla Extra, he finds some parallels between Priscilla and Frida's boss fight, most notably the identical set of attacks and the very similar way they turn invisible. Now let's turn our heads to the other DLC, and before actually getting to the Ring City part of the Ring City, let's look at the Drake Heap. And somehow over time this mess of an area led to the original Firelink Shrine being at the bottom of that massive pit. This is also the case for the Kiln of the First Flame, which is most likely the same one in Dark Souls 1. But I will say there are some odd parallels between Gale's arena and the original Kiln. Most notably, the same yellow hue that the sky carries with the overcast of clouds. Mix this together with the endless wasteland of ash and it makes the two areas feel very similar. Speaking of Gale's arena, in the distance you can see two cities, one of which is Lothric, which when inspected up close is a mini model of the actual area. The other city is less distinguishable, but is most likely Anor Londo. Although inspecting it up close doesn't help, we can compare the two rooftops and the similarities do seem present. Now let's get to the enemies, and although there might not be too many connections, it's just fun to look at. And in Lothric and Farron Keep, the Edgelord himself makes a reappearance, except he's a lot more intimidating now that he's surrounded by bodies. My favorite enemies make a return, although they're not alive, but this absolute unit mushroom and tiny baby mushrooms can be found dead around Elizabeth's cave. Up until now, I've been avoiding the invading phantoms, but they're jam-packed with references to Dark Souls 1, and one of my favorites is the phantom man-eater Mildred, who's a cannibalistic woman that wields a butcher's knife and wears a sack upon her head. But in the Road of Sacrifices, she makes a reappearance, wielding the same butcher knife but wearing a way worse hat. Now, many NPC phantoms in Dark Souls 1 reappear in Dark Souls 3, and to me this seems as just a fun way to have recurring characters and to show off some of Dark Souls' more extravagant gear. And before the comments say anything, I'm aware that some of these phantoms might not actually be the same person, such as Kirk Knight of Thorns and Longfinger Kirk. But for the sake of this video, let's pretend they're two of the same. And the other two that I'm aware of are Xanthus and Black Iron Tarkus, which both appear in Dark Souls 1 and come back for revenge in Dark Souls 3. And somehow another video has turned into comparing things. Hopefully you found something interesting, cause I had no clue there were this many connections, and it shouldn't keep surprising me, but the attention to detail is astonishing. But that'll do it for today. I appreciate you watching up until this point. Have a good one.